Hey folks, BlackCross here. Hopefully you all are doing wonderful today. And today I have finally gotten around to playing a Nintendo Switch game, and it's not Breath of the Wild for once. It is actually another Nintendo Switch title, being that of Astral Chain. So before we get on to the actual review itself, I want to go ahead and stress about the rating system. As I'm sure you're aware of, I have a 5-star rating system, and some of you are probably asking yourself, well, how does the rating system work? Well, the way I rate games is based on how highly would I recommend people this particular games. And, you know, it doesn't show right off the bat whenever I talk about, like, games like Medieval or Final Fantasy VII for that matter. However, though, whenever I talked about Ni no Kuni, I gave it a pretty low score, considering the fact that I felt like it was an okay game. It has stuff that came from like Dragon Quest and stuff like that, and for a first time RPG, it's not a bad concept. It's just it lacked in terms of the combat system, followed by the fact that other elements that was in the game, I felt it could have done a little bit better, probably even developed its own system, which it technically did, and I did kind of like it, but as for everything else, it didn't follow through all the way, and it could have done better in my personal opinion. So if you were a Studio Ghibli fan, per se, you might have liked the game because of the art style, and you might enjoy the combat a little bit, followed by the RPG and the story. And this game is sort of the same way. I personally didn't care much for certain elements. There were other elements, however, that I really loved, but then there were some others that fell short, and, well, best way to do it is just get on straight to the review and talk about it. So with Astral Chain, it was actually developed by Platinum Games, who, for anyone who is familiar with them, is the same people who've worked on games like Bayonetta and stuff. And these people are very talented. They are really good when it comes to making these hack and slash beat 'em up type games, if you will, of course, hack and slash beat 'em ups. Or the way most people call it, the DMC style of gaming, where you basically play through an entire section or chapter, depending on what you want to call them, chapter all the way from beginning to end in order to get to the next chapter, so on and so forth. And along the way you'll get like abilities that you can upgrade later on, you can purchase items and stuff, so on and so forth. But Astral Chain does it a little bit slightly different. And by slightly different I mean it's a little bit hard to describe it, but it's sort of like a slash between a mission base versus a, I suppose you can call like a actual linear world type thing. It's a little weird transitions, but really the best way that I can go about describing this is just basically let's talk about the story, and then we'll move on into the segment of the game itself. So what's the story about? Well, the weird thing is I didn't quite catch all of it. From what I'm understanding, technically a post-apocalyptic realm happened, and these people moved into this realm known as the Ark, or the city known as the Ark. But because of this post-apocalyptic problem, this alternate dimension known as the Astral Plane is taking people left and right and basically stealing them and placing them in the Astral Plane itself. And in the Astral Plane, there's actually these creatures known as chimeras. And these basically are the enemies that you'll be fighting throughout the entire game. So in story concept, you basically play as one of two twins in the game. You can either play as the male character or the female character, and what's really nice about this is the fact that as you literally start the game, you can choose to how to customize in terms of either color of their skin, style of their hair, followed by the color of their hair, and the color of their eyes. So it's very nice to kind of see that we have somewhat of a customization in this. So whenever you're playing as one of these two, whether it be the male character or the female character, as you're basically playing in the game, you basically start off learning literally about the world itself, where chimeras followed by people that are continuously res shifting, and ultimately it sounds like they are becoming chimeras. I wasn't quite understanding it, but as far as what it sounds like once someone res shifts, they can't come back. So I'm assuming the chimeras and res shifts are more or less connected in the same way. But the only thing that can stop these chimeras, because chimeras cannot be seen by normal people, is people who hold a device called the Legatus. And what the Legatus is that it holds a creature inside the device known as legions. This is of course the main concept of the game, where you as the main character control a legion and use them in order to battle the chimeras. Hang on a second, legion? That sounds awfully familiar. So as you're controlling the legion themselves, you're using them in order to chain up or imprison to some degree the chimeras followed by the enemies of the game in order to hold them down to where that way you can actually do damage to them. And this works out pretty well actually. It's pretty interesting of how the controlling of both controlling you and controlling the legion in order to intergate them, in order to trap them within the chain that you hold between you and your legion, which is pretty interesting, I thought. But in that same concept, basically, as you play through the game, all of your legions almost get separated except for your own legion, which is the Sword Legion, and afterwards you do have the chance in order to attain more legions throughout the game, up to 5 different ones of course. And basically in this game you're basically playing through a anime style, I suppose an anime drama. Actually I don't think it's close to anime drama. It's an anime style gameplay. Basically you're going through the entire chapter like an episode per se, all the way up to the very end in order to progress to the next chapter, so on and so forth. But each in particular chapter has a particular step setup, and allow me to explain the step setup into it. So within the first step of the chapter section, basically you are either in Neuron, which is the main headquarters that you will be at, or if you're at the very end of the game, you're basically in the slums. And basically this allows you to upgrade your equipment. You have a chance to change your entire outfit based on color or looks. You can even change the color look of your legion as well, which is very interesting in my personal opinion. Of course, afterwards, you'll also get to interact with different characters, and if possible, there'll be some side missions that you can do within headquarters. And of course, that being said, that's just the first part of the chapter. The second part is whenever you're out in the field. As you're out in the field, you're basically more or less doing other side quests and other jobs, or in this case, other cases. cases. Either way, doing other cases in order to more or less get more points, more experience per se, so on and so forth, in order to both upgrade and purchase points or purchase abilities for your legions. And you're basically doing all these different cases, and they're all optional, but there are 2 different types of cases. There's the red case and then the blue case. It's kind of hard to say which one is which, because really I didn't pay close attention to which type is which. But ultimately, if you want to just go through the main game, you only have to follow the yellow indicator that's on your minimap. And then of course that's where the main gameplay takes in, is that you're basically playing through the entire game, going from one end to the very end in order to progress through the story. And the story can sometimes take twists and turns depending on what goes on into the environment. For example, you're basically going through in one area, but then you end up going into the Astral Plane. There you'll either encounter a very powerful boss, or you'll be fighting up against one of the 5 legions that you will have to fight in order to attain their power. And then afterwards, you then end up going through some story segments, followed by some more bosses probably perchance, or to continue on through the next chapter. Now, again, all of this stuff, while it may seem scattered, they all do play a part when it comes to building up the game's mechanic, being that of, well, the Astral Chains. So the first part, obviously, why would you want to do all these different jobs and side quests and stuff? Simple really, to give you more cash to build up, followed by more points, or codes as this game wants to use, to upgrade your legions. So aside from upgrading your weapons and legatus, you can also upgrade your legion by either boosting their stats or giving you extra abilities that you can equip onto your legion. It can also give you an extra slot in order to equip some different status boosts that will help you in battle. And personally, I actually like this system. I really do enjoy I suppose technically it's considered a skill tree. I do actually enjoy it really. It's really fun and interesting because where, you know, whenever you're playing through the game and stuff like that, you think to yourself, could I get all of the abilities? And the answer is technically no, not in one playthrough. But over time, you can eventually get the abilities that you need in order to progress further into the game. And really, upgrading your Legion is actually essential if you want to enjoy the game even further. For example, the Sword Legion is your first Legion that you attain, but you also get 4 others. These are, of course, Arrow, Arm, Beast, and Axe. Wait, Sword and Arrow? This stole from Chaos Legion! As awkward as this might sound, yes, this is an actual concept that was taken from Chaos Legion, where you do summon up legions, and the first 2 ones that you do attain is Sword and Arrow. Conveniently enough, right? But unlike that game, this one you actually do summon up, and you get to control, technically, and help you in combat. For example, all 5 of them have the ability to where they can hold up to 2 different abilities, and these different abilities, depending on which one you earn, can be essential to helping you in battle. Whether it's increase your status by either speed or strength or defense, or it can be an alternate move that the Legion can use in order to help you in battle, or, depending, you can get an ability called Astral Chain, which basically imprison any nearby enemies, which is very helpful to have. But there's actually another prospect that's in the game that actually adds up into the game itself, and that's whenever you get to have the abilities to chain combos. Now in the game you have 2 different types of combo abilities to enable. You have the first one being that if you are able to successfully deliver a full string of combo hits, you are able to actually use the Legion's power added on to yours in order to deliver devastating abilities. The second one is that if you dodge an enemy's attack, that also initiates another counter combo move with the Legion itself. And it varies depending on which of the 3 weapons you hold, followed by which Legion you are holding at that time. So it gives you that major variety that adds on into the main game, and it really is an entertaining combat system. I really do enjoy it. I love the fact that as you upgrade the Legion, they become more and more powerful based on your timing in terms of attacks, and if you're able to successfully dodge these attacks, which is really interesting. And technically, if you want to be realistic, the game actually does have like somewhat of a aerial recovery, and so long as your Legion is out, they will actually save you from a hit that you took and bring you back onto your feet. If you didn't time it right, well, you have to get you back up, and depending on how close the enemy are, they can deal that much more damage to you. So it's very essential to have these Legions have this ability of being able to do the synchronization that they have, being able to pull off these extra moves and stuff like that. But it goes even further, technically. For example, the Legion also has different abilities that they can use. You have the Sword Legion, which has the ability to cut walls. You have the Arrow Legion, which has the ability to shoot from afar. You have the Arm Legion, which has the ability to open doors, followed by give you an extra protected layer and levitate you from the ground. The Beast Legion you can ride on, followed by dig things up from the ground and track stuff like a natural dog would. And then the Axe Legion, which basically protects you from poison damage, followed by other array of damages, and it is the strongest Legion in the game. But there's the thing about the Axe Legion is that it doesn't attack that often, so really it's mostly in the defensive maneuver until you synchronize your attacks with the Axe Legion, in which case then it is a very powerful Legion. The combat itself is so intuitive and is really engaging, and I do actually love how the combat works in Astral Chain. However though, despite how perfect the gameplay sounds, it does suffer a few setbacks, especially in the environments. Now, of course, in the environments, you will actually get into a counter of 2 different segments. You have the city segment, followed by the astral plane, and depending on where part in the story you're at, depends on the environment itself. For example, you will still suffer from status effects such as poison, shock, burn, ice, and potentially paralysis whenever you're knocked out. Not only that, but you also have the fact that you gotta be careful of ledges. And if you fall off a ledge in the Astral Chain, or any game for that matter, the Sword Legion will automatically pull you back up, but you will lose a chunk of your health in the process of this. Not only that, but if you are also in the Astral Chain, you also gotta look out not only for chimeras, but other obstacles as well. There may be trap floors that could disappear that you could fall through easily. There could be moving objects that could easily push you off those ledges. And if you encounter a flying chimera, they can easily knock you out of the field to where you can fall. So again, these hazards do add on in terms of the combat. And for most people, this wouldn't seem like a problem until you encounter the camera angle. Sometimes the camera angle will actually potentially get stuck on some kind of wall edge and prevent you from getting a good angle of not only the field but also the enemy as well. And depending on how that happens, it can ruin the gameplay experience, in my personal opinion, I think. Not only that, but there are also other enemies that do certain abilities as well. These enemies are either up in the air, which means you have to use not only your gun, but arrow legion in order to knock them down to the ground. There may be some enemies that are buried underneath, which means you have to use your beast legion, and you can kind of see where this is going. Which leads on to my second problem that I have with the game, and that the legions kind of follow a Legend of Zelda formula, if you will. If any of you are fans of Legend of Zelda, you know where this is going. As soon as you attain an item, you know instantly what you're going to be dealing with, whether it's the actual area itself or the boss that you will be encountering. The same way can be said with this game. As soon as you attain a new legion, you're going to be spending a little bit of time learning how to use that legion in a very long, lengthy process. And the same thing can be said for any of the said more mentioned legions as you progress into the game. This isn't a bad thing because it's basically teaching you new mechanics, but at the same time, it feels like as if you're going through a, if you will, Groundhog Day feel, meaning that you're basically repeating through the same pattern over and over again, only to progress through the story in order to attain new stuff, new abilities, but you're still progressing through the same things. And this can actually kind of ruin the experience for some people, where it feels like you're kind of repeating it over and over again. So you may feel confused at times, where it's like, wait, why am I here in the Neuron office again? Well, because you started a new chapter, you're in the next section, meaning that's where you start off in the game. And the same thing can be said further out into the game. It basically repeats itself continuously, where you start the game in the main hub, then you can go into the open linear area, and then continue the story. And it feels bad, really. It's a weird setup in my personal opinion. But not even that, but also to the backgrounds can sometimes feel samey as well. Like if you're not out into the city, you're also in the astral plane, which kind of blends together really. You have this mixed color of blue and red, which is convenient considering the game's tagline of blue and red. And it really matches up. You have the city and Neuron, which mostly consists of blue, followed by the slums and astral plane, which consists mostly of red. And you'll see this color a lot, and this color transition, they all kind of blend in together, and it kind of makes you feel like you're still in the same area without even realizing that you're in a different area entirely. So in terms of backgrounds, it's kind of bland, really. But to continue on from there, though, there is some extra stuff that you can do in the game. For example, next to upgrading your legion, you also have orders. These are what I would consider like objectives, followed by achievements or trophies, if you will, where basically you have a list of requirements that is needed to fulfill, and you can get certain stuff out of them. You can get potential healing items, different code material that you would need in order to upgrade your legion further, or different accessories that you can equip, or different color sets that you can attain in order to change not only your character, but also your legion as well. Now you're saying to yourself, that sounds like really fun, right? That sounds really good. Except sometimes you really don't feel like you want to go any further. You know, again, this kind of feels samey in a way. You're going through Neuron, you're going through the city, astral plane, repeat, rinse and repeat, while occasionally checking on your orders to see what new stuff you've already completed, followed by how much more you need in order to progress further with the next order. You also have a picture mode, meaning that you're going to be potentially taking certain pictures during each chapter, much like in Kingdom Hearts, of course, or any game now that has a photo mode, of course. You also have the fact that technically you're going to be doing a lot of stuff, like for example, blue shifting, which means you're healing people of red shift, attaining item, using item, defeating a number of chimeras, so on and so forth. So again, there's a lot of stuff that can be done, but really because of how lengthy and boring the entire game feels, you really don't feel engaged about wanting to do this. And I'm sure some of you are going to be asking, well, what if there's a particular thing that you got to do for the order, but it's in a different chapter? Well, the good news is that technically you can backtrack into other chapters, which is a very nice thing, meaning that you can literally start from the very beginning, play through it, do whatever objective you need to do, and come back into the main chapter, except for one problem that I have with it. And that's the fact that technically you can't go back into the main game like you normally could. The only way you can actually get back into the main game is if one of two ways. One, beat that chapter that you are in, or two, go into the options, quit the chapter, and then once you're at the end chapter menu, it will ask you if you want to proceed on into the file chapter select, and instead of pressing yes to where you could choose the further chapter like you would normally in any game, you simply hit the back button or no, and it automatically proceeds you to the main chapter. Thing is, the game doesn't clearly tell you that part, so it kind of leaves you hanging about, okay, well, how do I go back into the main game to progress the story, followed by how can I go back into previous chapters and stuff. You know, again, I didn't even realize you can interact with the PC, and if so, what would you be able to do with it? And it wasn't until I saw the file case and stuff that I realized, oh, you can go back into previous chapters. I beat that chapter and I go, where's the next chapter that I was supposed to progress in? So you see, it doesn't tell you. It's just, you're kind of left hanging there. And not only that, but you have all these extra abilities, all these extra moves and stuff that pile up on top. And sometimes you'll forget certain things that you can do, followed by certain abilities that you may have that could help you. Another issue that I have, though, is of course the fact of the ability slots. Now, not to say the move abilities are bad, I'm talking about the actual ability slots. Potentially your Legion can have probably up to 5 different available nodes to equip different abilities. But these different abilities can vary depending on the status effect, followed by the potential boost that it can give you in the game. Some of them is based on the field range, some of it can be recovery rate, some of it can be stat in terms of defense, power, speed, so on and so forth. And so it's kind of hard to keep track of all the ones that you want to keep, followed by all the ones that you don't really need. Thankfully, they do categorize them better based on what you're looking for. But still, you get a lot of different random abilities, I feel like. A lot of different random abilities that can show up between here and there. And it's not just for one node. Depending on the level, depends on the likelihood if you need 1 or 3 nodes. So in other words, you're going to be using each node depending on which one you're going to be using. And I felt like this could have been done a little bit better rather than giving you what felt like random abilities. But that's just one aspect alone. Again, this is mostly just within the game itself with all these small little tidbits and details. There's another issue, and that's towards the end game. When you beat the final boss, you do have an epilogue story. Basically, you go in there and you do these quests that a character known as Olive will give you. These are more or less skirmishes where you go through the entire field destroying chimeras and stuff, and this is really great because that means that you get to engage more into the combat. And while that's great, and you do attain a lot of different codes that you can use in order to upgrade your Legion, followed by upgrade your weapon. But the problem that I have is that, again, the backgrounds feel the same. So you're kind of going through the same skirmish almost, depending on how often you go through. And apparently, there's a total of 70 of them. Yeah, 70 of them. And again, with the game, the backgrounds blending in together and being somewhat bland and boring, I don't feel like wanting to go through them in order to get to the potential end of the epilogue. You know, it does kind of end on the ending of chapter 11, and it ends it quite well to where you don't necessarily have to get all of those skirmishes done in order to get to the final epilogue. But depending on who you are and depending on how much you may enjoy the game, maybe you might feel engaged about doing it, and maybe you'll actually get to encounter the secret boss that the game gives you, perhaps. Of course, as these orders and different skirmishes that you can get, you also get potential different accessory pieces, followed by different color schemes that you can get for not only you, but also your Legion as well. And this is really cool, and it's really nice to have that. The only problem is, you don't get a lot of options when it comes to customizations. Like, whenever you first start off customizing your character, you're not really given a full option list of customizations that you can do. And even as you go through looking around the world, gathering items, followed by attaining items through orders or quests, they're not really that good in terms of looks and stuff. So depending on who you are, you're not going to be customizing your character as much. If you are, it's mostly for color and hair look alone. Again, there's not much of a customization option, unfortunately. What I can say though, aside from all of that, is that the music, much like any other game that Platinum Games does come out of, their music is excellent. Seriously, some of the soundtrack that's in Astral Chain is pretty kick-ass, and if you ever get a chance, definitely look them up, because they're worth listening, much like a few other games that they have done that have a soundtrack. Most personally, my personal favorite one, aside from this one, would be that of Metal Gear Rising that they did, which was really nice. So while all of that is being the case, what do I give my rating for Astral Chain? Well, again, this is for personal opinion, but if I had to give it a particular rating, I would give it, personally for me, probably a 2. But that was only because of the fact the first time I tried playing it, I couldn't really get engaged with the game personally. And of course, keep this in mind, it took me like 3 months before I finally was able to decide to beat the game. And then as I picked it up a second time, I started a new profile as a female character, and this time kind of went engaged with both the abilities, followed by the different move sets that the Legion can use and stuff, and really varied it up. And that's whenever I got to enjoy the combat a little bit better. But after that, the rest of the game just felt samey, and really could have done some improvements with that setup instead of being a rinse and repeat segment that you're going through in the game. Like, I understand the in-game process being that of the fact that, you know, every single time you complete a skirmish, you always come back to Neuron. But in my personal opinion, if you're going through the main game, some of the major should happen and change where you don't constantly go back to the main hub. The main hub should be an optional area only until the end game. Then it can be a main stationary area. But instead, they made this literally the main thing that you have to start off in every chapter. So again, it feels like a rinse and repeat Groundhog Day feel pattern. So again, while it's not a 2 this time around, I would definitely give it a 3 out of 5 star. Again, it's not a bad game. It's really good, especially considering Platinum made it. But everything else wasn't as outstanding as it could have been. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this review. Again, Astral Chain was pretty interesting, but I didn't really get well engaged with it. So to me, it kind of fell off of the fell off of the fadeaway. But it is a pretty interesting game, and if you enjoy hack and slash games or anything that Platinum makes, chances are you will enjoy this better than I would. Just know that it can repeat itself at times, and that may ruin the experience. But if you can get the combat down, upgrade your legions to as far as you can, and you will find a really good gem with this game. And I highly recommend it, if only to a handful of people who will enjoy it. Again, the rating system is based on how likely would I recommend it to people. And for me, it would definitely be 3 out of 5 people who I think could enjoy it. It's not a complete 100%. So some people might enjoy it, others may not. You know, your mileage may vary. So thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.